All right, let's talk about a paper that is absolutely essential for your finance qualifying exams. Robert Townsend's 1979 classic. We're going to do a deep dive into his work on costly state verification so you can walk into that exam feeling like you've got this completely covered.
So here's our game plan. We'll start with the big puzzle that got Townsend thinking in the first place. Then we'll dig into his key insight about what it costs to get information. From there, we'll see how that idea naturally leads to the best possible contract, which, and this is the cool part, turns out to be just a simple debt contract. And finally, we'll see if this whole idea holds up in a real competitive market. Let's jump in.
First things first, the motivation. You know, a lot of the greatest papers in economics start by pointing out a huge gap between our neat and tidy theories and how the world actually works. This is one of them. And this is the central question that really gets the whole thing started. Why is the financial world full of really basic things like loans and bonds? I mean, at the time, our best economic theories were predicting these incredibly complicated, super detailed contracts designed for perfect risk sharing. The fact that we didn't see them was a huge puzzle that really needed an explanation.
This slide really lays out the conflict, doesn't it? On one hand, you have the leading theory of the day, the Arrow-Debreu framework. It says that for perfect risk sharing, the payments on a contract should change with every single possible thing that could happen in the future. But then you look out at the real world, and what do you see? Simple debt. As Townsend pointed out, firms just issue bonds that promise one single fixed payment. So what explains this massive gap?
And that brings us to Townsend's brilliant solution. He basically argued that the standard models were missing a couple of really critical real-world problems. One party knows more than the other, and it costs money to fix that imbalance. The first piece of the puzzle is a concept you're definitely familiar with: asymmetric information. It's simple, right? The person actually running the project, the borrower, they know exactly how it did. The person who put up the money, the lender, they have no idea. They only know what the borrower decides to tell them. And here's the second piece, the real kicker: costly state verification. Sure, the lender can find out the true outcome, but it isn't free. They've got to pay for it. Think about hiring auditors, lawyers, all the time and effort that goes into due diligence. This verification cost is a pure deadweight loss. It's just money down the drain that doesn't create any new value. And as the paper argues, it's this cost that makes that perfect state contingent contract a bad idea. Okay, so we've got our two big problems. One person knows more, and finding out the truth is expensive. So how do you design the most efficient contract you possibly can in a world like this? Let's take a look at how Townsend set up his model. You know, the model itself is actually pretty straightforward and elegant. You've got two people who don't like risk. One's a lender, one's a borrower, with a project that has some random outcome. And of course, only the borrower sees that outcome. The whole goal here is to find a Pareto optimal contract. You know, one where you can't help one person without hurting the other, that makes sure the lender gets paid. But, and this is the most important part, does it while spending as little as possible on those costly audits. Now, this is where it gets really, really cool. Townsend takes this setup, solves the optimization problem, and what he finds is, well, it's a genuine eureka moment for financial economics. So, the key result, which you can find in Proposition 3.1 of the paper, is that the most efficient contract doesn't need all these complicated state contingent payments. Nope. Instead, it optimally splits the entire world into just two simple zones, a bad news zone and a good news zone. So how does this actually work? It's pretty genius. In the bad news states, where the project's return is low, the borrower says, hey, I can't pay you very much. The contract says, okay, fine. If you claim a low number, I'm going to pay to check your books. And once it's verified, the borrower just hands over everything they have. But in all the good news states, the lender doesn't check anything. The borrower just pays a single, fixed amount, no questions asked, and no money is wasted on auditing. This whole structure is designed to save on those verification costs. You only audit when you absolutely have to, when the borrower reports bad news. And if you stop and think about what we just described, what does that sound like? A fixed payment when things are good, but when things are bad, an inability to pay triggers a costly verification process where the lender comes in and takes over the assets. That isn't some weird theoretical contract. That is a standard debt contract. Solvency is just the non-verification region, and default, that's the verification region, which maps perfectly onto costly bankruptcy proceedings. Okay, but you might be thinking, and it's a totally fair question for an exam, does this clever idea only work for two people sitting in a room? Well, Townsend takes it a step further. He shows that this same logic holds up even in a full-blown competitive market. Yeah, in section 6 of the paper, he scales this whole thing up. He builds a general equilibrium model with tons of competing lenders. And he shows, first, that a competitive equilibrium can exist where lenders are all offering these debt-like contracts. And second, he proves the outcome is a constrained optimum. In other words, it's the absolute best you can possibly do given the fact that information is costly. This is huge. It proves that debt isn't just some weird quirk. It's a fundamental feature of an efficient market. All right, let's bring it all home. We've gone through a lot, but if there is one single thing you need to remember from this entire incredible paper for your exam, this is it. This right here is the absolute heart of Townsend's contribution. Before this paper, a lot of people just saw debt as a clunky, simplistic tool. Townsend said that actually it's an incredibly sophisticated and optimal response to a fundamental problem in economics. Debt contracts are everywhere because they are the most efficient way to minimize those deadweight losses from verification. They literally save society from wasting money auditing every little thing.
And that really leaves us with this bigger question, right? Townsend totally changed the game by focusing on the hidden costs of information. It makes you wonder, what other puzzles in finance, like why some firms use debt and others use equity, or how insurance contracts are designed, what else could have an elegant explanation that's just rooted in the simple but profound cost of finding out the truth? That's the legacy of this paper. Good luck studying.